Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're back down at work again, doing a bit more to our Farmall F14. We've got it fairly well stripped down now. There's a few more things we've got to still take off it, but we've made good progress with it. It's now part of a tractor and a large pile of bits in the back of the workshop here. So making good progress with it. Today we're going to be looking at rebuilding the fuel pump on it. Now this is the original fuel pump. You can still buy kits and everything for these. This side here is the pump. There's a glass sediment bowl here with a filter arrangement in it. I have given this a quick degrease already. The next thing we're going to do is to give it a bit more of a clean up. Okay, so these are pretty basic fuel pumps. We've got an inlet on this side that then goes through the fuel bowl here. There is a valve under here, a little spring-loaded valve. There's a spring-loaded valve on this side. Now these are what are called uncaged valves. So when we undo those, the little springs will fall out and probably go on the floor, and we'll have to try and find them again. Most modern fuel pumps have what's called a caged valve. It's in one piece and you just press it in. Other than that, this is the same as any modern fuel pump. There is a diaphragm in here. So there's a bundle of screws around the top here that take the top off with the diaphragm in here. Unlike most fuel pumps, we've got a pipe out the bottom here which is just a drain hose. If you start getting petrol running out here, you know that you've got a hole in the diaphragm. On modern fuel pumps, they often have a hole somewhere to let the petrol out, but you have to be very careful. If they get a pinhole in the diaphragm, the petrol will run down and contaminate the oil in the sump. And that can then wear out your bearings quite quickly and cause a few other issues. We also have a cover on the bottom here which is going to make it much easier. On the inside here there's the actuator for the diaphragm. So there's a rod running off the cam that pushes on here that pulls the diaphragm up and down in here to draw the fuel from the bowl in through this valve, and then out through this valve and out through this pipe here. So we're going to strip this down now and have a look and see what's inside it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is undo these 3 screws here to expose the mechanism in here. Now this cover has a little bit of a spring on it too, so we just need to watch out when we've undone these screws that we don't lose the spring that's inside here. That's going to be the return spring for the diaphragm. Oh, and there's 2 return springs. That's a little bit unusual to have 2 of them, although I suspect there's a few pumps I've seen with this bottom cover like this, so those probably all have them in. It's still not that common. Now we can see the mechanism in here. That's the bottom of the diaphragm here. That feels like it's seized up a bit. So when the push rod pushes on here, it pulls the diaphragm up and down there. We've got a little cork gasket here. We've got a replacement for that. The next thing we're going to take off is this row of screws around the top here. So before we take them off, we might just undo these 2 plugs with the valves in here while we've got a little bit more to hold on to. If they will come undone, that is. So the valves are quite simple. I think they're just going to be a ball bearing valve in here with a spring on. You can see there's a very, very light spring just in here. There's not much to it. And oh no, it's not a ball bearing, it's a piece of flat, sort of like a piece of gasket material. Where's my... Okay, so it's just a little piece of well, it's like a piece of hard gasket material. So that's one of the valves, and it just sits on a seat down in there, which is pretty dirty. And we'll try and undo this bigger one too. This one's going to have a spring in it too. Once again, another really light little spring, and another piece of flat hard material in there. Okay, next we're going to finish undoing these screws around here. Sometimes the diaphragms are a rubber material, and they can stick everything together quite hard sometimes. Particularly by the time they get this old, they're well stuck together. There we go. Right, there's a little tiny pin R-clip in here that we've got to take out. And a pin that we have to get out. We need to pull this pin out here first, so that we can slide this mechanism into a different spot to actually get it out. This pin up here has got another little tiny C-clip on it that we've just got to undo. Okay, there's that little clip. So now we should be able to push, if it's not seized up, which it is, of course. We should be able to slide this pin all the way through and out this side. Then we should be able to slide this mechanism through and turn it sideways. And this pin here should come out now. So there's the pin out of there, and now this funny mechanism in here is able to lift out. It's a good idea to work out how these all go together, because some of them just fall apart for no good reason. Then we can take the base off. So this is the diaphragm in here, and it's pretty hard and perished. There's a spring mechanism in here that we need to take off before it falls off. So basically all this pump does is move this diaphragm up and down. As the diaphragm is pulled towards me, it sucks fuel in from down in this hole here, up past this valve. When the diaphragm stops moving, this valve in here closes to block this passage off, and as it pushes back up, it squeezes the fuel out past this valve and onto the carburetor. Yeah. And That's your diaphragm. This one actually has a nut on the inside of it, which means if you wanted to, you could just make a new diaphragm for it if the rest of your pump was all right, or you were in a bit of a sticky situation. Most of them are riveted there, so to replace the diaphragm you've got to cut the rivet off and then try and re-rivet it later on. So there you go, that's all there is to a fuel pump. Okay, so we've cleaned up all our parts. This is the kit that comes with it. This is a pretty good kit. It's got a lot more in it than a lot of the kits have. This is the new diaphragm. It's a riveted one, so we can't change just the rubber as easily, whereas the old one has the nut in it so that we could take it apart and just change the diaphragm. But you can see how much more flexible the new diaphragm is than this old one. This one's just starting to crack up. This kit comes with new valves, new valve springs, new main springs. The only bit that would have been nice to have in there is this spring here, which goes on the bottom of the diaphragm. So we're going to start by putting the pump top back together with the diaphragm in it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is put this spring on the new diaphragm. Now, the fuel pump top can go either way round, and the diaphragm can actually go in any way round too. So we just need to be a bit careful to get everything lined up. The diaphragm here needs to go so that the screw holes in it line up and this pin is running this way. So we're just going to sit the diaphragm in there for the moment, and then we're going to put this piece in here. Now, the kit comes with all new pins. I've put a new pin in this part already. Next, you sometimes need a spare hand, an extra hand for doing this. Next, we're going to feed this in and put the pin on the diaphragm, the pin that holds this mechanism to the diaphragm. So, new pin and new clip, and that goes through this hole here in the diaphragm, through all of these holes here, and it's a little bit tricky just to wriggle it in, but because we've got a new diaphragm, it makes it, and the new diaphragm's a bit more flexible than the old one, we can do it without all the mucking around we had with the old one. We put that clip on there. Next, we want to put the pin in here. So we've got a new pin with new little C-clamp clips to go in here. That's just a matter of getting all of these pieces in here lined up. Okay, now when we poke on here, the diaphragm should go up and down. So that's good, that's all working. We'll put the other C-clip on here. There we go, we've got that clip on. Now we can start assembling the top here. So this has got spring washers on all of these screws. Okay, next to the valves. Now this is the valve housing for this one here. It's got this little light spring in it. We've got new springs, so we pull that spring out. Now this is the little valve seat, or the valve itself. This moves up and down in there. The spring holds it down on the seat that's inside there. So we can drop that in and make sure it's sitting down flat on the seat. Fish out a valve spring and that sits in there. And if we look down there, we can just see the spring is sitting in the right spot. So we do that up. And then we do the same for this one here. Okay, so we've also got new little fibre washers to go on here. So fibre washer, spring, I think that goes the other way up. Drop the valve into place and make sure that's sitting down properly. And screw that on. The next thing we have to put on is this bottom plate here, but there's a gasket and 2 springs to go in there. It's a cork gasket, and I'm just going to use a bit of this Permatex Aviation Celastic material, gasket material on this. This is a bit of an old bottle of it, so we'll just put a tiny, that's a bit thick. Doesn't matter, that'll make sure that it sticks well. This really shouldn't get too much of anything in here, but it will get probably just a little bit of oil in here to oil the bottom end of this. We'll also put a bit of oil in when we've finished, just to oil up all the pins and stuff for when we first start the tractor. There's an oil drain hole here that drains back to the sump, so there is a bit of stuff that splashes through here. Okay, to put this together, we're going to put the gasket on here, and the gasket glue will help hold that in place. We're then going to sit the 2 new springs in here, the 2 pieces that sit on top of the springs. We're going to turn the fuel pump up the other way, and we're going to put this up from underneath into place with the spring pressure on. And then hopefully we can turn it upside down and put the 3 screws in here. So these 2 springs in here push the diaphragm back up. Push the diaphragm back up after the pumping stroke. Usually it's just one big spring under the diaphragm, but this one they've obviously decided needed a little bit more than that. Okay, so now when we push on here, we can hear it pumping. The next thing we can put in is this little brass fitting that just screws in here. Now this is a drain fitting in case our diaphragm gets a hole in it and starts leaking petrol. It will leak out here rather than going into the sump. And we've got this funny little vent hose that comes off here. This is just to help stop getting bugs and stuff like that up quite so far up there. The last thing to go on here is the glass bowl. Well, almost the last thing. So we've got a little mesh screen in here that goes in, and then the cork washer that holds it, or cork gasket that holds the mesh screen in. We can put the clamping bolt, the bowl clamp back on. That just springs open into these 2 holes here on either side. Then the glass bowl can go on. And then we've just got these 2 fittings here that attach the fuel lines. I'm just going to put these in loose for the moment until we get this back on the engine. so we know which direction they need to go to line up with the fuel lines. We've got to remake the fuel lines anyway, so there'll be a bit of mucking around and adjustment with all of that. Anyway, that's how you rebuild a fuel pump. This one is quite old, but it is very similar to a lot of the more modern ones. The more modern ones have different types of valves in them, and the diaphragm isn't always pinned in. There's a number of different ways they hold the diaphragms in. But if you can do one like this, you can do fuel pumps off a whole bundle of different vehicles. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and I hope to see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.